Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Rosh Hashana Daf Beis takes us to the end of the first chapter of the Masechta, and begins the second chapter. There are 5 Mishnayos on Daf Chaf Beis, all surrounding the topic of testimony for when the new month begins, touching on various topics such as whether you are allowed to have pasul edim that are not acceptable for other types of testimony, whether or not they are acceptable for this testimony, including ksherim and things like that, psulim and things like that, krovim. And the Gemara will also touch, the Mishnayos will also touch on other psulim, and they'll discuss somebody who's too ill to travel. If we bring him, we carry him, how much do we mechal Shabbos? And the next parak discusses sending somebody along with the witnesses in order to confirm his trustworthiness, and it introduces the topic of the fact that people try to mess up the systems that the Beis Din had in place and have false testimony or have false messengers bringing the message of the Rosh Chodesh, and what the Beis Din had to do to adjust to these saboteurs. So we begin with the Mishnah, 4 lines into the Daf, and the Mishnah says, what happens if you have a father and a son that saw the moon? Can they go and say Eidos? Can they go and testify to the Beis Din in Yerushalayim that they saw the moon? Would they be acceptable? So the Mishnah says clearly they should both go travel, and the implication is even if it's Shabbos. And the question is why? A father and a son are krovim, they are related to each other, and you cannot have 2 witnesses testify for something if the 2 witnesses are related. So the Gemara says that the Tanna Kama says they should go because maybe one of them will become puzzled. That means to say he will get messed up in his words. There'll be something wrong with his edus, and the other one will at least be kosher. So you don't know which one's going to get messed up. So they should both go. Maybe there'll be a third aid that he could join together with. Reb Shimon says that they are actually kosher for this edus. The psul of krovim, people that are related to each other, only applies to testimony about something that involves a person's, some monetary or halachic requirement that involves people or other people. But about this, you are allowed to have krovim testify. So the Gemara says that Rav Yossi says that there's a story that happened with Tuvia, the doctor, who him and his son and his freed Eved saw the moon, and they went and they testified. Before they went, the Kohanim told them, you and your son can go, but the Eved, he shouldn't go because he's pasul edus anyway. When they went to Yerushalayim, they ended up taking him and his Eved, but they did not allow the son. So you see, you never know who's going to be the one that will be acceptable. So the Gemara discusses, what is the reason of Rav Shimon? Why does Rav Shimon say that relatives, krovim, are kosher for this type of edus? So the Gemara says that Rav Shimon learns it from a pasuk. In discussing the responsibility of the Beis Din to declare the new month, it says, "V'yomer Hashem Moshe v'Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim leimar." Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "Chodesh hazeh lochem." This month should be for you. So he was talking about establishing the. Hashem was telling Moshe and Aaron about establishing the new month, and he said it should be lochem, and that is understood in the Joshua as it's to you. This type of edus is an edus that you can say. The 2 of you together would be acceptable, even though you're related, your brothers, would be acceptable. And therefore, you have Xeris HaKasav that krovim, relatives, are acceptable for this type of edus. Now, the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Shimon. That's because they have a different drasha from the word lechem. They mean to say that this testimony is given over to you. It's your responsibility. It's up to the Beis Din to decide when you can do this, and it's for tremendous Talmid Chachamim like you, for the leaders of the generation. It is your responsibility, and it's up to you to make this determination. So the Gemara now discusses, like whom is the halacha. So the Gemara says, Rav Chanan bar Rava said the halacha is like Rav Shimon. So Rav Huda said Rav Chanan bar Rava, how could that be? Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi against Rav Shimon, and also he brought a story. He brought an incident that happened where the halacha was paskin against him, like we saw in the case of Tuvia Reife. So the Gemara says, but what do you mean? But I have many times said in front of Rav that the halacha is like Rav Shimon, and he didn't say anything to me. So why are you giving me a hard time with this if he didn't give me a hard time? So he said, well, 1 second. We told him the halacha. Who said what? How did you tell him? So he said, I said the opposite of our Mishnah. The opposite. I switched around the opinions. I said that Rav Yossi is the one who said that it's acceptable if you have different adios. So Gemara says, well, of course, that's why he didn't protest, because you said the opinion's wrong. That's why when he said the halacha is like Rav Shimon, he said he agreed with you. The halacha is actually not like Rav Shimon the way we have it in our Mishnah. You said it wrong, and that's why he didn't have an issue with that. So Gemara says that Tavi, the son of Mari Tavi, said the name of Mar Okva, the name of Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rav Shimon. Okay, now we get to our next Mishnah. The Mishnah says these are the people that are puzzled to say this type of Vedas all together. They are people who play with the dice, that is, they gamble by placing a bet on what number will come up on dice. People who lend with ribis, people who engage in pigeon races, also a type of gambling. They place a bet on which pigeon will win that race. People who sell shvius fruits, and avadim, slaves. These people are not allowed to say this edus. The reason in all of these, except for the avadim, the reason is that they are suspected on what's called gezel derabanan. You place a bet, it's called stealing midrabanan, because the person does not intend to lose his money. He thinks he's going to win the bet. He does not fully intend to lose his money. And when he ends up losing, you take it away from him. He never really agreed. In his heart, he did not agree. So you're taking money away from somebody who didn't really agree, and that's called stealing midrabanan. So Gemara says that the rule is as follows. These people are kosher for any type of edus that a woman is kosher for. Any other type of edus that a woman is not kosher for, they are parcel for as well. So there were comments. So this shows that all these types of people are kosher for edus about letting a woman remarry if her husband did not return, testifying that that husband is not going to come back ever because he died. And any type of a person who's a gazlon midrabanan, this type of theft midrabanan, like we're discussing here, is kosher for that type of edus. Okay, now we get to our third Mishnah on the Daf, and this ends off the parak. There is no Gemara on this Mishnah, and the Mishnah says as follows: somebody who saw the new moon, but he does not have the ability to travel, so we put him on the donkey and we send him to go, or we carry him, and we make sure that he gets there. Now, if there's people who are hunting him on the way, or people who would physically threaten him on the way, so we take sticks with us. It's very important that we go, and even in the case of us being threatened, we'll take weapons and make sure we get there. If it's very far, then you even take food. Even on Shabbos, you'll have to carry food because it's very important to have this edus happen. Now, even if it'll take you as long as the travel of a day and a night, still machal Shabbos in order to be able to get there. And all this is learned in the fact that it says, it's very important you establish the correct time of Rosh Chodesh in order to get the Yom Tov in the right time. Okay, now we start the second parak, and this begins with also a discussion of traveling to say edus for the new moon. So the Gemara says that if the Beis Din in Yerushalayim were not familiar with somebody who's coming to say edus, we send along other people along with them who are trustworthy or are known in order to testify to the upstanding character of the witnesses who saw the moon. Now it says we send acher, we send another in the singular. The Gemara will discuss why in the singular. Now the Gemara says in the old days they used to accept witnesses from anybody. They didn't have to establish the character of the person who was testifying, but then the Baisusim, who are a type of Tzedukim, the students of a Tzedukim named Vaisos, they messed things up. The Gemara will explain what they did, and therefore they made the rule we cannot take edus from anybody. We can only accept a testimony from somebody who we know, or we can establish the validity of his credentials. So the Gemara says, it says here you only have to send one person in the singular. How is it enough to send one person along to testify that this person is good? You should need plural. A single individual is not accepted for testimony for most things. So Gemara says, I'll prove to you that he's not accepted because we have a brisa that says there was an incident that happened and they sent witnesses in order to testify to the character of the people who were testifying. So you see, you need plural. So the Gemara says that Rav Papa answers, what does it mean when they say acher, when they send in the singular, they send a singular thing, they send another to testify, they send another pair of edim. So it's one pair. So it's singular. Two witnesses, but it's a singular pair. The says it's logical, it has to be the way, because it says, if they did not recognize it, ein makirin oso, because it's the same word for it and for him. That means that the original witnesses are also referred to here in the singular. So just like they don't recognize it, meaning the original pair of witnesses, the pair that saw the moon, obviously that has to refer to two people. So it also talks about the ones that are going to testify the character. It's also talking about two people, but it's referring to them as one pair. Now, the Gemara just proves that you do not accept one person who actually saw the moon, because the Torah calls it a mishpat. Mishpat is in the phrase ki chokli yisrahu mishpat lekei Yaakov. That's how we refer to this, a testimony about the moon. Mishpat follows the rules of justice, which always requires 2 witnesses. So now the Gemara asks, hold on a second, one person should be trusted. You're telling me one person is not trusted, and one person should be. And I'll prove it to you from a brisa that says that Rabbi Nehorai went to testify for the existence of the new moon, that he had seen the new moon, and he went in to say a testimony when Sanhedrin was in Usha. It was a time when Sanhedrin left Yerushalayim and they went to Usha, so Rabbi Nehorai went to testify. So why would he go himself? You're telling me that one witness is not accepted. So Gemara says 2 answers. Answer number 1 is that he went with somebody else. There were 2 people, but we only mentioned Rabbi Nehorai because out of respect for him. That is, we were trying to show that even a person who's great individual should not consider it beneath him to go travel to say testimony. And the proof is that Rabbi Nehorai went. So we're not going to demean him by saying him and another person, because that shows that the greatness of that other person is also considered to be significant, while it's really Rabbi Nehorai we're trying to point out. The Gemara's second answer is that Rabbi Nehorai only went because it was somebody else who lived in Usha who knew this testimony, and Rabbi Nehorai was planning on joining up with him. The Gemara says, if that's what happens, so then what's it teaching us here? What does this brisa show? The Gemara says it shows us is that even though he didn't know if he would be able to meet somebody there, he assumed there would be somebody there, but he didn't know for sure. Still, you can be Machal Shabbos, even though you're not sure that your testimony will be useful at all. So now the Gemara relates that when Ula came to Bavel, he said that they were Mekadesh, the new month, in the west. In Eretz Yisrael, they were already Mekadesh, the month. So Gemara says not only Ula, that Rav Kahana said, not only Ula, who's a great man, and his testimony is believed if he says that Bezdin was Mekadesh, any person who comes and says, I'm telling you Bezdin was Mekadesh it, we would believe him. And here, for this type of testimony, that is not testifying to Bezdin that you saw the moon, but testifying to everybody else that Bezdin was Mekadesh, that you would accept even from one individual. The reason for that is this is not testimony, this is something that is, the truth will come out eventually. We're all going to find out at some point if Bezdin really was Mekadesh the month or not, and therefore people aren't going to lie about it. You don't lie about something where you're going to be caught eventually for sure if you happen to be lying. Okay, now the Gemara gets into the discussion of what the Baisusim did, how did they mess things up. So the Gemara quotes a brisa that says that the Baisusim ones wanted to try to fool the Chachamim. They wanted to try to create a situation in which people thought that it was the new month was on day 30 when it really wasn't. And they hired false witnesses to testify that they had seen the moon when they hadn't. Rashi explains that they wanted to make sure that the second day of Pesach would come out on a Sunday, because they wanted the Karban Omer to be on a Sunday. They held, as Tzedukim do, that when the Torah says Bayom HaRishon, it doesn't mean the second day of Pesach, it means Sunday. They wanted to make sure that it came out on a Sunday so that the Karban Omer would really be brought on a Sunday. In order to do that, they had to make the month of Adar into a 29-day month, and therefore they sent false witnesses to come early. So the Gemara says they hired 2 witnesses to go tell Bezdin that they had seen the moon. But the 2 witnesses that they brought, one was a person who was on their side, and one was a person who was on our side. So the one who was on their side went and he testified and he left, no problems. The one who was on our side actually was the double agent, and the reason he went was in order to prevent somebody else from going who would have fooled the Bezdin, and he went and he revealed the plan to the Bezdin. But what he said is as follows. He didn't just say, hey, they hired me. He said the following thing. He said, look, I saw the moon. He had to. He had promised he would. He said, I saw the moon. I saw it crouching between 2 rocks while I was on the way up the mountain of Maladumim. I saw it crouching between 2 rocks. Its head looked like a calf. Its ears looked like a kid, a young goat. Its horns looked like a deer. Its tail was between its legs. And I looked at it, and I got shocked, and I fell backwards. And if you don't believe me, the proof is that I have 200 zuz wrapped up in my wallet. So that was the giveaway that he'd paid to say he saw the moon. And the Bezdin understood, and they said, who hired you? So he told over the story what happened, and he said, this Baisusi hired me. And from then on, they made the rule, we can no longer accept testimony. We see that the Baisusim are out to make trouble. We can't accept testimony unless we know that the people have been testified as their character, that they're not Tzedukim or Baisusim. And as far as this guy, they told him you could keep the 200 zuz. Rashi explains, even though he didn't earn it properly because he gave away, he did not fulfill the job he was hired to do, but doesn't have the right to take money away from it. People, Hefker, Bez, and Hefker, they took the money away from the Baisusim who gave it to him, and they awarded it to him. And now we get to our fifth and final Mishnah on the Daf. And the Mishnah says the discussion of the system of lighting fires. So the Mishnah says in the old days, after Bezna had established and they were Makadosh the Chodesh, they sent messages throughout Eretz Yisrael and beyond by a system of fires. That's they would have somebody stand on a mountaintop and he would light a fire with branches, and he would wave it up and down, right and left, until people on the furthest mountain away saw it and they began lighting the fire. Once he saw the fire being waved on that mountain, he could put his own fire down, and that in this way the messages went from mountain to mountain until in a very short time, and at the speed of light, it was spread all throughout, and that was a much faster way of sending the message. The problem was that the Tzedukim got involved, and again they messed up the system. So the Mishnah describes how the system works. Actually, it doesn't say Tzedukim, it says the Kusim got involved, and then they had to stop using the system of the fires. They had to actually send messages to carry the message that Rosh Hashana had been Mekudesh. So the Mishnah describes how did the fires work. So they would take cedar wood, wrap it up with reeds, and olive wood and flax, wrap it around with a rope, tie it to the end of a long stick so that they could hold it up high, send it to the top of the mountain, light it, wave it up and down, right and left, until they saw the same thing happening on the far mountain away. And then they did it until they saw it on the third mountain. And the chain of mountains went as follows. The first one was on Har Zeisim. The next one was on a mountain called Sartava. Next one was Gupina. After that, Chavron to Beis Baltin. And there, they waved it back and forth until all of Chutz La'aretz was lit up aflame like a gigantic bonfire from all the fires on the mountaintops. So the Gemara comments on the use of words here. The fires are described as Masin Masuoi. So the Gemara says, how do you know that Masin means fire? The Gemara says, the Pasuk in Shmuel, Vayisa Eim Dovra Anashav, and the translation of that, the Targum is Va'okedinon. So Moked means fire for sure, so here we know that Vayisa Eim means that they lit a fire. Now the Gemara quotes a Brisa, and it describes how the fire system worked exactly. So the Brisa says they only lit fires when it was declared a short month, a 29-day month, and day 30 was Rosh Chodesh, it was day 1. So then on the evening after day 30, they did the system of the fires. And it's interesting because they were saying that the day that has just ended is day 1. That was Rosh Chodesh. They couldn't do it the night before because they didn't necessarily know that it was going to be Mekudesh the next day or not. Well, when this day was over, when day 30 ended, if the fires were lit, that means that today was day 1, today was Rosh Chodesh, the next day is day 2. If it was a 31-day month, then there were no, if it was a 30-day month, and the next day, and the day that just ended was day 30, not day 1, and the following day was going to be day 1 and not day 2, meaning it was a Chodesh Mole, then they would not do any fire system at all. They didn't do fires a day later, they just didn't do any fires at all. So Gemara says, well, why do they do it that way? So Gemara says, because what would happen if day 30 was Shabbos? So if day 30 was Friday, so they wouldn't be able to do it at the end of day 30 in the normal time they did it. If day 30 was Friday and it was declared to be day 1, so that night they wouldn't be able to do it because that night would be Friday night. So they would have to do it the next night. So they did it the next night to show that Shabbos was really day 2, and Friday, instead of being day 30, was day 1. So Gemara says, the problem, if they had a system where they did on day 30, if it was a short month, then they would do the fires at the end of day 30, which is day 1. And if it was a long month, they would do it at the end of day 31 to show that today was Rosh Chodesh. So then when day 30 was a Friday, then they wouldn't be able to do any similar, they wouldn't be able to do any sign at all, because they couldn't do it until Matzah Shabbos, which is the end of day 31, and people would get confused. They wouldn't know whether this Matzah Shabbos is the end of day 31 because day 31 was Rosh Chodesh, or are we doing signs, the fires on the end of day 31 because day 30 was Rosh Chodesh, but we couldn't do day 30 because day 30 was Friday, and Friday night we couldn't do fires. So we wouldn't know what to do. We would get confused. Therefore, we made the following rule. We'll only do fires at all, at any time, if it's a 29-day month. That way, whenever we do it, whether it's day 30 or day 31, because day 30 was Friday, either way, we will have a clearer understanding that this is what we're doing in order to show that it was a 29-day month. So the Gemara says, why don't we just solve the problem by having a system where they do both at the end of day 30 if it's a 29-day month, at the end of day 31 if it's a 30-day month, and if day 30 was a Friday, then they won't do any fires. If they don't do any fires at all, so people understand that this must have been a 29-day month, because we couldn't do anything else. If it would be a 30-day month, so then they should understand we're doing it at the end of day 31. How would that work? Because the people would understand. If it was a 30-day month, so then why wouldn't the Bezin do a normal fire at the end of day 31, like they usually do at the end of a Chodesh Maleh? The fact that they're not doing it's because it's a Motzei Shabbos. There's no reason that they can't. The fact that they're not doing anything this month must be because it was a 29-day month, but the end of day 30, which was the first day of Rosh Chodesh, they couldn't do anything because it was Friday night. So on a month like that, they shouldn't do anything, and people will understand that the reason they couldn't do it is because it was Friday night. So Gemara says no, people still wouldn't understand. They would still think that it was really a 30-day month, and although they could have done a fire on a Motzei Shabbos, they didn't. They had too much geschmack food at Shabbos, and they got a little drunk, whatever it was, and they didn't manage to do the fire. Therefore, we did it this way. So the Gemara says, so then, okay, I understand that you can only do fires either for 29-day months or for 30-day months. But my question is, why do we only do fires for a 29-day month and not for a 30-day month? Let's only do fires for a 30-day month and not for a 29-day month. Someone says, no, you can't do that, because then what would happen would be is that nobody would know which day was Rosh Chodesh until the end of the second day, and every Rosh Hashana they would have to keep 2 full days. You would lose a day of work even on a time when you didn't have to, because you wouldn't know anything until after the second day. So to avoid that problem, we always had the fires set up after the 29-day month. And if it was a 30-day month, there were no fires.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.